Okay, during the last class, you were learning about observations, predictions, and inference. You know that you're going to discover uh, the world around you by using your sense. If you use pictures or you use adjective, see, words, just to explain or just to record what you have in your environment, uh, you are recording your observations. They can be qualitative if you're using numbers, or they can be quantitative. No, qualitative if you're using your words and you're using pictures, or quantitative if you're using numbers. Okay, so for example, if you're touching a glass of water that contains cold water and you realize that the water is cold, that's a qualitative observation because you don't have any number there. Okay, you may see that the glass is like the air is condensating, like sweating. The glass is sweating because the air is condensating outside the glass, but you don't have a number to describe that observation. Now, if you get a thermometer and you put that inside and you realize that the temperature over there is, I don't know, 4 degrees Celsius, then you're using a number to describe that observation. Is the moment that you're using a number, you are recording a quantitative observation. And that's the difference, okay, between qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative numbers, and qualitative you're going to be using pictures just to share what you are observing, or you're going to use words that in this case you use adjectives to describe what you are observing with your different sense. Now, then we were talking about inference. When we're talking about inference, is when you're trying to explain what you're observing based on your previous knowledge. For example, in the case of the glass, see, you can infer that the water inside was cold because the glass was sweating. That means that the air around was like hotter and it was condensing the moment that was touching the cold surface. That's an inference, okay? Because you are trying to explain what you are observing. And then we were discussing prediction, and a prediction for that situation is that the water will become warm, or the temperature will increase until it reach the temperature of the room, because since it's exposed to the air that is in the room, like a transfer of the heat is going to take place until the temperature inside and outside the glass are the same. Okay, and that's the prediction. See that? I'm observing a glass with cold water. Qualitative observation. Okay, and inferring there that the water has to be cold because the glass is sweating. Okay, I see drop of water outside the glass. That's an inference. And I'm predicting that in the future the temperature inside the glass is gonna have the same temperature that the air outside the room. That's a prediction. That's basically the difference between prediction, inference, and observation. But what are you gonna do with that? What are you gonna do with that? That's today's lesson. Okay? So for today's lesson, the two objectives, you remember what I was saying the other day. The objective, they are not there for decorations. The objective, they are there to let you know that at the end of the lesson, if you don't master the objective, you have to go back to the video and watch it as many times as needed, okay, until you master the objective. Okay, so you will have two objectives here. Today you have to be able to identify the variables, the control group, and the constant given an experiment, and you have to be able, if we have time, just to write valid hypothesis. If right now you don't know what is a valid hypothesis, you already know what is a hypothesis, but you don't know what is a a valid hypothesis, but we're going to touch that topic today too. What is scientific inquiry? And I'm copying that over here because scientific inquiry was the first vocabulary word that you have there in your activity. Okay? What is scientific inquiry? And I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with the term. Because, see, when you were learning about the scientific method in elementary school and in 6th and 7th grade, I'm pretty sure that your teacher was touching that term. So scientific inquiry, and I'll copy that right there, refers to the diverse way in which scientists study the environment, the natural world. Okay, in which scientists, they analyze whatever is happening in nature, and they propose explanation for the process that are taking place based on the evidence that they gather. Remember that we were talking about observations. When the scientists, they are collecting data, they are recording quantitative observation. When they gather that data, they analyze the data or that quantitative observation, and they are arriving to conclusions, and that's the evidence that they have just to explain what is happening. Now, in order to gather all that evidence, they need to conduct experiments. And what are you doing when you're conducting an experiment? You're testing a hypothesis. And you have that in your vocabulary activity too. What is a hypothesis? You know that a hypothesis is an educated guess. Okay, but what is a valid hypothesis, Ms. Ramos? Because you're talking about hypotheses, but we don't know what is a valid hypothesis. Valid hypothesis is a testable hypothesis. A hypothesis that you can reject, you can accept through experimentation. If you cannot conduct an experiment, there's no way, for you to have reliable results, so you don't have a valid hypothesis. You cannot say that you accept or reject the hypothesis because you don't have evidence. You don't have observation. You don't have quantitative or qualitative observation just to prove what you're saying. You just remember that it's not about your opinion anymore. It's about what you are observing and the evidence, or your conclusions, they have to be based on the evidence that you're collecting. So that's a valid hypothesis. A hypothesis that can be tested. A testable hypothesis. Let's say that you want to analyze how the solar flares are affecting the chemical composition of the dust in the moon. Since you don't have the resource to go over there and check the chemical composition of the moon dust, you don't have a valid hypothesis. Okay? So it's a hypothesis that is testable. Now, if you know the hypothesis, one more time, it's an educated guess. How are you gonna write your hypothesis? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with that. I don't know if when you were in elementary, your teacher was telling you to start writing your hypothesis by writing I think. That's not the case anymore. It's not about your opinion. It's about what is really happening, based on facts. So the format to write a hypothesis, you're going to start always with if, because a hypothesis is a conditional clause. You're testing that. You cannot say that you have a statement in there because you don't know. If the behavior of the independent variable, then, you have the behavior of the dependent variable because, and then you make an inference. You just keep in mind that when you are making an inference, you are basing your inference in your previous knowledge about that topic that you are studying. Okay? Questions? No? We're good until here? Okay, we're gonna continue. Now that you know the format of a format to write a valid hypothesis, you have to find the independent and the dependent variable in your experiment in order to write your hypothesis. Okay, first you have to define independent variable, and that was in your vocabulary activity. Independent variable is the variable that you are changing on purpose, that the experimenter is like manipulating. That's why independent variable is also known as the experimental one, since the experimenter is manipulating, changing that on purpose. Okay, is also known as the manipulator one. Now, what happened with the independent variable? Since the experimenter or the person that is conducting the experiment is changing that on purpose, that experimenter has control. If you are the experimenter, you have control over that variable. For example, let's say that you want to analyze how the amount of water is affecting the growing of the plants. You're going to be changing the amount of water that you're putting in your different plants, but you have control over that. Okay? So, this one more time, independent, the manipulated one, the one that you're changing on purpose, and you have total control over that. Now, the dependent variable, also known as the observable one, the outcome of the result, because that's what you're recording. Okay? This variable is going to stay the same, and the answer is no. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. No, both are going to change. The independent, because the experimenter is changing that. The dependent, because it's going to change in response to the variations in the independent variable. Now, do you have control over this one? The answer is no, because remember, this is the response to the change that you were making to the independent variable. Okay, just keep that in mind. Both, they are going to change throughout the experiment. One, the independent one, you have control over that. The other one, you don't have control over that one. See, remember that we were using the plants as an example. See, you want to analyze how the amount of water is affecting the growing of the plants. Independent variable is the amount of water that you're putting on the plants. Now, what is the thing that you're observing? See, growing of the plants. So you're going to start measuring the height of the plants. Okay, the height of the plants is going to change, of course, but in response to the amount of water that you were putting there. Okay, questions until now? No questions. So once that you have the independent and the dependent variable, you are ready to write your hypothesis. Okay, but we're going to stop over here because I want to complete some guided practice with you. And here we are. Okay, just completing an example. This is what I'm talking about. Okay, we are not talking about defining anymore. Now you have to apply what you know about dependent and independent variable. Okay, has to create okay, I'm gonna cancel. Okay, my goodness, one more time. Dependent variable is the variable that you're gonna manipulate, that you're gonna change on purpose. In this example, what is the thing that you're changing on purpose? Aiden Fernandez, example. In the example that you have in front of you, Mr. Mandarich, remember, wants to know if the color of the light is affecting the number of leaves. What is the thing that you're changing there on purpose? Can you unmute yourself?
You're changing the amount of light.
The what?
You're gonna change the amount of light
The amount.
shine on the plant.
Look over here. The color.
Oh,
The color of the light. So the thing that you're changing on purpose, if you're independent, see that? Just stay there, Aiden. Okay. Remember, the independent is the thing that you're controlling. Mr. Mandarich is controlling the color of the light. He's gonna change that from blue all the way to red, passing by purple. See? He's gonna observe the dependent one. Okay, what is the dependent one?
the plant.
The plant. Who said that? The number of leaf.
Aiden Hernandez.
The number, stay there, of leaf. Because you're recording that. When you are recording this, Aiden Hernandez, number of leaf, is that a quantitative or a qualitative observation? Quantitative. Why?
Because it's a number.
Because you're going to use numbers. Understand that? Okay, next example. Next example. See, if you have this here. Who wants to read that for me? Mervin, can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Okay. Can you read from the board?
Yeah.
Okay, read that.
You are managing a large feedlot. A
Pharmaceutical.
Company wants you to try a new antibiotic to treat shipping fever in newly arrived cattle. The company claims that it is more effective and has a lower cost than the current antibiotic you are using. You will measure the temperature of the cattle's fevers to see whether or not it works.
Okay, so in other words, you are trying to see which antibiotics work best. Okay, so maybe do not unmute yourself. Do not mute yourself. In this case, what is the factor that you're changing on purpose? What is the factor that you're changing on purpose? No? Jaden? The antibiotic. You have the old one and you have the new one. The antibiotic. Antibiotic. Okay, because you have the new one and you have the old one. Now, what are you going to observe? You have to, let's say that you have two groups. One is taking the new one, the other group is taking the old one. And what are you going to observe?
Which one's more effective?
How are you going to observe that?
By testing it.
How? Read the problem. What are you going to measure to see which one is more effective?
To see the temperature of the cattle.
You're gonna. So the dependent one is the temperature. The temperature, okay, of the cattle. Fever. Now, I'm going one step forward because we're not there yet. Okay, Mary, I'm talking to you. If the temperature, see, of the fever is not too high, what can you say about that antibiotic? Mary, you don't want to talk to me. Let's say that you're giving that group the new antibiotic, and when you're taking the temperature is not too high. What can you say about that antibiotic?
The antibiotic worked?
Yes, that's the conclusion. See the relationship? Okay, so I'm gonna continue with the third example. That happens a lot when I'm ready. Miguel, do you want to read? Miguel Montoya, do I have to unmute you? Okay. Do you want to read?
No.
No, you don't want to? No, that's fine. Okay, Lucas, I'm gonna mute you. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Is can you no? But I haven't seen using this. Okay, no. You cannot see over there. Let me do that again. And let me stop sharing over here because it has one more time. And just stay there because you're gonna read the example. Okay. You're gonna read the example. Okay. A ver, mi madre. Okay. AirPlay. I'm gonna share that. Okay. Okay. A ver. Okay. A ver. Just read that.
Okay. Identifying independent variables.
You have to find, but I want you to read the problem first because if you don't understand the problem, you're not gonna be able to identify the independent and the dependent variable.
The shopping mall wanted to determine whether the more expensive, tough stuff floor wax was better than the cheaper Steel Seal floor wax at protecting its floor tiles against scratches. 1 liter of each brand of floor wax was applied to test sections of the main hall of the mall. The test sections were all the same size and were covered with the same kind of tiles. Five other test sections received no wax. After 3 weeks, the number of scratches in each of the test sections was counted to observe the wax effectiveness.
Okay. Independent variable. What is the thing that you're checking there on purpose? No? What are you doing there?
You're trying to find which floor wax is better.
So what is the factor or what is the thing that you're checking there?
The wax.
The wax. That's your independent variable. The wax. If you have two, okay, the steel seal, which is the new one, and then you have the tough stuff. See, you're checking that on purpose because you have a section that is gonna be covered with one, and another section that is gonna be covered with the other one. Dependent. What are you observing?
Which floor wax will do better in protecting the floor tiles?
And what are you observing in order to determine that? How can you say, for example, that a steel seal is better than the other one? Read
by testing out each of them in a span of 3 weeks.
And what are you going to record for as an evidence that one is better than the other one? Continue reading. This after 3 weeks, the number of scratches in each of the test session was counted to observe the wax effectiveness. So what are you observing in order to say that one is better than the other one?
Which one will leave less scratches?
Okay, the number of scratch. See? The number of scratches. And what type of observation is that? Quantitative or qualitative? Quantitative. If you're recording the number of scratches, is that quantitative or qualitative?
Quantitative?
Yes, why?
Because you're recording the amount of
numbers. You're using numbers. Okay? Numbers. You're gonna stop over